I want to just welcome you and thank you for joining us, members of the Congressional Black Caucus. We thought it was important that on the heels of everything that has been going on in Washington, D.C., that you hear from members with respect to our concerns around the Divert Action for Childhood Arrivals, as well as temporary protected status when it comes to immigrants of African descent, and by extension, the entire population that is affected by the executive orders of Donald Trump. We have here with us today Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Congresswoman Karen Bass, and Opal Tomati of Executive Director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And we are very concerned and stand shoulder to shoulder in the Congressional Black Caucus about the position that has been taken with respect to the Trump administration with regards to temporary protected status for a number of nations that are being reset right now as we sit here, some who have lost the protection that has historically been given to those who are either in harm's way through violence or natural disaster. And we believe that it is important that, one, that status be maintained until or such time as those individuals are either in a position where they believe that they will not be in harm's way should they want to return home, or they are given the option to adjust their status here in the United States so that they can remain. In the case of many of the Central American nations in particular, many of those individuals have lived in the United States almost half of their lives at this stage. And so when you remove temporary protected status for someone who comes from El Salvador or Honduras, you're basically sending someone back to a nation that they are no longer familiar with and have no longer any familial ties. And so we want to make it unequivocal that we stand shoulder to shoulder with the members of the Tri-Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the members of the Congressional Asian and Pacific Islanders Caucus, in a call for the administration to extend TPS to the nations, particularly those of African descent who have sought protection from the United States. And we intend to be very vocal around this because a number of these nations, including Haiti, which is yet to really recover from the earthquake, has been hit by the remnants of the hurricanes moving through the Caribbean seas right now, and has an outbreak of cholera that has not been abated, to send individuals who have work authorization in this nation, are providing remittances to families and really helping to keep that nation afloat, is certainly something that I believe is short-sighted on behalf of this administration. Those individuals are a lifeline to that nation, and indeed, it's a win-win because these individuals are also have added value to our communities, are building our communities here, are paying taxes in the United States of America, and have been extremely law-abiding and are part of the fabric of our nation. And so I want to encourage everyone here, if you have not had an opportunity to make your voice known around this, there is a struggle when it comes to particularly immigrants of African descent. And we are standing shoulder to shoulder to say that we challenge what the administration is doing with respect to these individuals and the value that they present to our nation and our communities. Having said that, I want to now yield and ask Congresswoman Barbara Lee to come and make her remarks. Barbara Lee is, of course, no stranger to most of you in this room, a seasoned veteran, progressive leader who has led the charge on whether it's peace in Afghanistan, stopping the Iraq War, or it's fighting against poverty. Barbara Lee has been certainly a mentor to me, but an extraordinary voice on Capitol Hill. Is my honor to present to you Congresswoman Barbara Lee of Oakland, California.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank my dear friend and colleague, a great leader, a woman warrior, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, for really sounding the alarm around this very important issue and for your tremendous leadership. I tell you, she is truly unbought and unbossed. Let me also thank Congresswoman Karen Bass for her fearless leadership on so many issues, as well as Opal. I mean, these two women really are the epitome of what our nation is, the hopes and aspirations of all of us for our nation, because they fight each and every day, not only to reflect we have to fight on the domestic level, but also on the global level. It's like, think locally, act globally. Well, Yvette and Karen and Opal do that each and every day, so thank you so much. First, let me just say a couple of things with regard to our country as a whole. Now, we've always been a nation of immigrants. For generations, men and women and children have looked to the United States as a refuge during their time of need. And the Statue of Liberty, which stands for a beacon of liberty, democracy, and hope, of course, you know the words. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. That also means black people. It means people of African and Caribbean descent, right? And Latin America, black people in the diaspora. That's for us also. So that's who we should be. It's a nation that should welcome all in need. Today, 440,000 individuals from 10 countries reside in the United States because we have kept our commitment to be a nation that opens its arms. These innocent men, women, and children are fleeing war, famine, disease, and natural disasters, and they found refuge here through the Temporary Protective Status Program. This long-standing practice has been honored for decades through Democratic and Republican administrations because of, regardless of political affiliations, as Americans, we always have stood for the protection and value of human life. So this should not be about politics, it's about keeping families together. Sadly, the Trump administration has failed to see the value in this program. Just this week, the administration announced it would terminate TPS designation for Sudan, despite the ongoing humanitarian crisis in that region, and it is a crisis. It's really a shame and disgrace what they're doing. TPS currently applies, as I said, to over 440,000 people in the United States from 10 countries. That includes Haiti, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan, which are predominantly black and account for nearly 20% of all TPS beneficiaries. That's why, as members of the Congressional Black Caucus, we're here to send a message loud and clear. We will not turn our backs on our brothers and sisters in time of need. We will not do that. TPS holders, we will not do that. TPS holders, they have families, they own businesses, they go to school, they contribute to this country in countless ways. And at a time when destructive hurricanes and flooding ravages our neighbors in the Caribbean, the last thing in the world that our government should be doing is turning its back on TPS holders. So earlier this month, we sent a letter, and it was bipartisan, urging Trump to grant TPS status to foreign nationals in the United States who are from Hurricane Irma-affected regions in the Caribbean. Hurricane Irma's 185-mile-per-hour winds made it the second fastest recorded hurricane in history. Returning to their homes in the Caribbean in its aftermath would be a serious threat to these individuals' safety. Providing nationals of affected areas with an opportunity to remain temporarily in the United States will contribute to greater stability and significantly aid in the ongoing mission of reconstruction. As Dr. King once said, the time is always right to do what is right. So it's time that we do what is right. And that's our message to this president and the Republicans today, to do what is right for families and children from the African diaspora. We must do what's right. And it's not just TPS that our president doesn't value, of course. He's failing to see the needed fix to our immigration system once and for all. Right now, millions of undocumented youth are living in fear of deportation because this president and the Republican Congress cannot muster the courage to do what is right. Deporting innocent people, including people from the African diaspora who come to the United States through no fault of their own, it's not only wrong, it's cruel, and it's heartless. And that's why we're going to continue to protect undocumented youth as we seek to ensure comprehensive immigration reform once and for all. So in many ways, resistance to this administration is a fight for the soul of our country. We can't afford to relent, especially when it comes to attacks on our fundamental values. And so we've got to fight until we get this vital TPS extension for those in need done. We must fight to protect the millions of undocumented individuals in our country, and we must fight to pass comprehensive immigration reform once and for all. And as we say in California, this requires us now to stay woke, my brothers and sisters. Thank you again.
And now another powerhouse hailing from the great state of California, former Speaker of the State House in California, the Honorable, and a ranking member on the Committee for the Continent of Africa, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Honorable Karen Bass.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very proud to be here today and very proud to be sitting on this stage with three very powerful sisters. We need to give them a round of applause. The leadership that Yvette Clarke has shown on this issue, not just within the Congressional Black Caucus, but within the House of Representatives, to make sure that when we are talking about immigrants, because sometimes people like to act like there's only one group of immigrants, like there's only one border. She makes sure that we are very clear that immigrants also look like us. And we will not accept being divided from each other. We will not accept being pitted against each other. And she carries that torch in the House of Representatives, and I really appreciate and respect her leadership. As Yvette Clarke said, we look to the woman in the middle. Both of us look to her as being our mentor. She has been a powerhouse on so many issues all around the country, and she's definitely been showing me the way in terms of serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee and working on behalf of the continent of Africa. And I also want to mention Opal Tomiti from BAJI, as we call it, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And I think this is one of the most important organizations in our community today, because they are leading the charge on making sure that all of us that are immigrants are united and not divided, and raising the issue of immigration in the African American community, number one, so we educate our own community and understand that Black folks come from all over the place. And frankly, back during the slave trade, they dropped more of us off in Latin America than they did in the United States, and we need to keep that in mind. And so BAJI is leading the way on holding us all together and carrying that torch. And I mentioned to Opal a few minutes ago, our leader Pelosi, has pulled together all of the various groups working on DACA to make sure that the dreamers are able to stay in the country. And we want to make sure that BAJI plays an important leadership role within that group as well. So if you think about TPS, temporary protective status, there's almost 500,000 individuals from many different countries who have TPS status in the United States right now. And 4 of those countries are predominantly black: Haiti, Sudan, South Sudan, and Somalia. And we need to make sure that this status is continued. Ironically, TPS was signed into law by a Republican president, Bush 41, and it's been robustly used by presidents of both parties since then. But the Trump administration doesn't seem to be committed to the point of this bipartisan consensus that has helped protect millions of people over the last few decades. So when we are fighting on behalf of DACA and the Dreamers and making sure that young people who have come into this country, no fault of their own, are not deported, we also have to make sure that temporary protective status is continued, because that's another opportunity to try to divide us. And we have to make sure that we are not going to be divided in any way. And when we think about DACA, again, the ones that are being put forward are Latino, and we stand in strong solidarity with our Latino brothers and sisters, and we recognize that there are black Latino brothers and sisters. We stand in solidarity, but we also want to make sure that people recognize that DACA young people come from many other countries, come from Caribbean countries, come from African countries, and we want to fight on their behalf as well. And so I am glad to say that represented here is the Congressional Black Caucus. But no, as Representative Clark said, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, the Congressional Latino Caucus, the LGBT Caucus, as well as the Progressive Caucus. If you add them all up, that's probably most of the Democratic Caucus. Stand in complete solidarity on this issue. And I just want to acknowledge for 1 minute, when it comes to the question of DACA, because sometimes I think we're so busy fighting in the trenches that we don't recognize when we've had important victories. And I will tell you that when I first came to Congress 7 years ago, and Barbara, you tell me if I'm right, Barbara and Yvette, I remember the Democratic caucus wasn't completely clear in support of DACA. I remember watching Luis get up and make an impassioned speech trying to get the Democrats to vote the right way. Congrats. Did you hear what she said? She said the Democratic caucus might not have been clear, but the Congressional Black Caucus was clear, 100%, and that was 7 years ago. Today, I can say with confidence that the Democratic caucus is 100%. And it just shows the advance that was made by this movement of young people who I would watch day in and day out as I sit on the Judiciary Committee, because that committee handles immigration. Day in and day out, I would watch the young people come and sit. They would come in their caps and their gowns, and they would just sit there. And that was a very compelling scene to see young people who were just arguing for the right to be in the only country that they've known, and how we could possibly consider deporting them. Well, the advancements that were made by that movement, number one, has united the Democratic caucus 100%, but it's also sent the Republican caucus in a scramble because they don't really know what to do. They know that their line tells them they're supposed to deport everybody, but they know that it's wrong. And so they're scrambling. And then the president, he doesn't know what to do from 1 minute to the next. So 1 minute he supports DACA, the next minute he wants everybody deported. We just have to catch him on a good day when he can think about doing the right thing. But anyway, I am happy to stand here with my sisters and for everybody to know that we are going to stand strong, we're going to stand united until we get this job done. Thank you.
And just to sort of bring you the perspective from sort of the advocacy, grassroots movement, folk who have been really organizing in the trenches, we thought it was important to make sure that we are working in tandem with folks who are out in the field, really seeing what's going on and really being a voice for what I call the voiceless. Because when I look at the assemblage of individuals who've identified as dreamers, I don't oftentimes see people who look like me. And I know that we exist, but for whatever reasons, oftentimes are not captured at the moment that there's some sort of action taking place. But there are individuals who are organizing on the ground, who are doing the deep dive into the policy prescriptions. And so it's my honor to bring to you at this time Opal Temerity, the Executive Director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration.
Well, I'm just so grateful to be here this afternoon. I think that this conversation and this particular press conference is obviously timely, but I look at you. I look at all three of you and your leadership, and I think about the fact that the Black Alliance for Just Immigration represents over 10 million self-identified Black immigrants, both first generation and second generation. And we were founded in Oakland, California, almost 12 years ago. Our new headquarters are in Brooklyn, New York, in Crown Heights, and this is our rep. and then we have offices also in Los Angeles, and so there is such a tremendous connection, and it really speaks to the fact that our people are everywhere. Right? And we are everywhere. And so it's important that we uplift the voices and the leadership of Black immigrants and ensure that their experiences are heard and that we begin to advocate fiercely for the protection of their rights. Right now, we are faced with a number of challenges. A lot of us are hearing a lot about DACA and the DREAM Act, but the reality is that we have an opportunity to advocate and uplift the struggles that most acutely impact Black immigrants. And these aren't only DACA and DREAM Act, although those are very important. Our people are there too. But temporary protective status is something of critical importance to protecting the rights and the viability of a life for so many Black immigrants. And so right now, there are over 400,000 TPS beneficiaries in the United States, 14% of which are Black. So they hail from Haiti, Sudan, South Sudan, and Somalia. And this is critically important to remember. When we look at developing and strengthening a democracy, we have to ensure that it works for all of us. And this includes making sure that our immigration system it reflects the breadth of our humanity and the breadth of who is actually here. And so right now we are fighting for redesignation for Haitians specifically who are here and who are demanding that they have their temporary protected status extended. But we also know that there needs to be a permanent solution. People cannot live in limbo like this every time. And so we're fighting and we're pushing forward, demanding that we have solutions that reflect the dignity of our people. The termination poses a real threat to Haitians in particular. They would be leaving behind thousands of members of their family. They'd be vulnerable to immigration detention and deportation. Their families would be torn apart. And this would impact the social and economic fabric of our communities. And we cannot stand for that. TPS holders are parents, they are children, they are loved ones, and they have, they're people who are homeowners, business owners, and so on. And so what we are doing is calling on the general public to contact your congressional representatives. Contact them and tell them to preserve temporary protective status. And then we're also urging Congress, we're standing beside Representative Clark and your fierce leadership and the fact that you've put together a proposal that should resolve this. But we're also saying beyond this, we want to make sure that we preserve the status and support and sponsor additional legislation if that is not sufficient. We need to figure out the solutions that will work. And we believe that Representative Clark, you have those solutions. But if it is not the case, that we need to find other ways, we are willing and able, and we are going to follow your leadership to that. We need a pathway to citizenship for all members of our community who are protected under TPS. That is our ultimate ask. And we invite you to stand with us, join us as we rally, and join us in making sure that your voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that this is a press conference, and so I want to open for our members of the press if there are any questions at this time. Yes, please. Would you come to the mic?
Can I go first?
Sure.
Hi, Congresswoman Bass. I'm your constituent, Leimert Park, Los Angeles, and Congresswoman Lee. You used to be on my radio show, the Kathleen Wells Show. Do you remember? I don't know. In the Inland Empire. Now I'm in Los Angeles, and let's see, 96% of us are direct descendants of slaves, right? I'm a direct descendant of slaves. We've been in this country 400 years. Identity politics is not working. So we know in Los Angeles, Black men are facing a job crisis. We know in Oakland.
Are you having a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
My question is, what? You remember being on my, yeah. Economically, my interest is Black America, who are direct descendants of slaves. Malcolm X asked us to be sophisticated politically.
And what's the question?
So my question is, how is it economically beneficial for Black Americans who are the direct descendants of slaves to be Pan-Africanists? That's my question.
How is it beneficial?
Economically beneficial, because the data is clear. How is it economically beneficial for Black Americans who are the direct descendants of slaves to be Pan-Africanists? Because that's what you're asking us to be. Tell me the economic benefit of that, please. I'm your constituent.
Okay, Thank you for coming, and thank you for coming to the workshop. Let me just say that we have real issues in our community, whether you are a descendant of slave from the United States, or whether you are a descendant of slaves from the Caribbean, or whether you are a descendant of slaves from Latin America. We have a very big job problem in our community, and one of the issues that I think is critically important to work on is making sure that Black people can get jobs. And so within Los Angeles and within our district, specifically what I have worked on is that whole Crenshaw line coming through, the transportation jobs, as well as jobs within the city of Los Angeles. And so it's my responsibility to get out there and do the outreach, because there are city jobs available, there are county jobs available, and make sure that our folks know about it. The other issue that we have within our community are folks who are ex-offenders. And so another big area that I have been working on is to make sure that folks who are ex-offenders who are formerly incarcerated can be hired. So that is proactive outreach that I have been doing in conjunction with our city councilman, Marquise Harris Dawson. Just 2 weeks ago had a fair that was specifically targeting Black workers. What I think is critically important, though, is that we cannot allow ourselves to be divided and pitted against each other. So I can work on behalf of African Americans who are descendants or in the United States, as well as folks from other countries who come to the United States who look just like you and just like me.
But that doesn't work, because that doesn't work,
Well,
because
if
Black
you want to have a conversation about it,
I'd
we
love
can
to.
do that on the side.
I would love
because
to.
what we're trying to do right now is a press conference, and I know that there is a distinguished representative from the New York Times who would like to ask a question, but I'm happy to continue to dialogue with you about this, okay?
I would love to continue the dialogue.
So let's do that.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you. I'd like to talk with you too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question.